In March 1987, Max got his own primetime show on ABC television in the United States. Max was a star, and in prime time. This video will be about the first season of Max, which was 6 episodes. The first episode, Blitverts, was a short retelling of the Channel 4 introductory movie. Some of the characters were still there, but a lot of them were recast to be more US-centric. Edison, Theora, and Reg are pretty much the only survivors. Everybody else is recast. I'll precede the description of the episode each time with a list of interesting things that were brought up in the show that were forward-thinking for 1987 and sometimes forward-thinking for now. So welcome to 20 Minutes into the Future. Max debuts on ABC on Tuesday, March 31st, 1987. It replaced Probe, a adventure show, I guess, which was moved to Saturday night. The lead-in show for Max was Moonlighting, a screwball comedy and perfect, really, for leading into Max. In addition to the casting changes, there's one other major change in the show from the movie on Channel 4, and that's Max staying in Channel 23 rather than going out to Reg's bus. Interesting things. Zigzag has a slogan, which is, "No future." And say that to yourself, no future. I really liked the keyboards on the show. They were clicky-clack keyboards of the old school and sometimes really old school from teletypes. The computers didn't use mice, which I thought was really cool, having come myself from the era of just terminals. Who needs those newfangled mice things anyway? I also like the graphic interface that was used by Theora to break into the camera system going in through a different subsystem of the building's network. Bryce's lab is on the 13th floor, which, according to everybody in the building, doesn't exist. The 13th floor back in the day was thought to be unlucky, and so some buildings had a 12th floor and above that the 14th floor and no 13th floor at all.
Oh yes, there is.
The city, which is the only place we see in the show, is made up of a drab, depressing, deteriorating inner city surrounded by even drabber, even grimmer, even more deteriorated area called the Fringe, which is outside the city's administrative control. Those people living in the Fringe are unmolested by the police, but are also not served by any city services, including access to food or water. As we will see, the Fringies subsist mostly on stuff they scavenge and sell back in the city. The idea of the body banks from the Channel 4 movie is taken sort of to the extreme, where people are sold to the body banks, whether they're alive or dead, for the money that they can be got. So where Broydel and Mahler were selling Edison as a sort of special case, it appears that it's just done all the time, and people can buy and sell bodies from the body bank normally. When Edison makes it to the garage underneath Network 23, the cars he finds there are Tucker 48s, of which only 50 were built in 1948 and were sort of famous as being a forward-thinking car. There was actually a movie made about it with Jeff Bridges. In 1987, 46 of the total of 50 that were built still existed and still ran. So it's likely that those cars really are Tuckers. And last, the head of Zigzag is called Ped Xing. But if you look at it a different way, it's pedestrian crossing. So on with the episode. We start with Edison arriving at a news scene by helicopter to investigate a story of an explosion in an apartment building.
I want to know one.
This is Edison Carter, answering the questions other people are afraid to ask. What I want to know is this: who died today in apartment complex 142 Zeta, and who is trying to suppress the story? Come with me now, live and direct, on Network 23.
It turns out that the explosion was actually a person exploding, and thereby hangs the tale. We will discover that this explosion was actually caused by a test of Blitverts by Network 23. When he finds out about Edison's investigation, the chairman of Network 23 orders the story suppressed. And so Edison is pulled off the story immediately. During that, he's endangered while on the ground at the story site, and when he gets back to Network 23, he insists that his controller, a guy named Gorister, be removed as his controller and replaced by somebody else. The somebody else turns out to be Theora. Edison finds out that the story was pulled by the board and asks Theora to see if she can figure out what was said by the board that would cause this to happen. Theora manages to access a security camera in the men's bathroom on the top level and overhears two board members talking about what they call the Blitvert problem and how they got Edison off the story, which Edison finds very interesting. And they also use the name Bryce. So using that, Theora discovers that there is a Bryce Lynch who works as a researcher on the 13th floor. And Edison says, "There's no 13th floor." And Theora says, "Oh, yes, there is."
Oh, yes, there is.
So after business hours, Edison, with Theora riding shotgun, manages to make it onto the 13th floor. He discovers Bryce's lab. While he's in Bryce's lab, Edison sees a copy of the Blitvert exploding guy video. Bryce discovers that Edison is looking in on his lab and manages to jam his transmission back to Theora. Bryce decides that since he's seen the video, he has to be stopped. And by stopped, the clear implication is killed. This is going to be a big change coming up for Bryce's role. In Blitverts, he's really a bad guy. Later on, he becomes a good guy. He then sends masses of security guards to get Edison. In the Channel 4 movie, this role was taken by Broidel and Mahler. In this episode, it's done by Network 23 guards. This leads to a great chase through the halls of the 13th floor, and these guys falling from the sky. It looks really cool, but what were they doing up there? So after the chase, Edison winds up in the basement. There's those Tuckers. Grabs a motorcycle and tries to make an escape. He's pursued by Network 23 guards. While he's trying to get away, Theora and Bryce are trying to duel with the building's automatic systems to stop him or let him get away. This mirrors what happened on the Channel 4 movie, and at the end, Edison flies through the Max Headroom sign just like in the Channel 4 movie. Edison is taken to Bryce's lab, where Bryce scans his brain to try and find out what he knows. In so doing, he creates Max. Max is fully formed. In this one, he doesn't have that I'm sort of Max and I'm sort of not stuff from the Channel 4 movie. Broidel and Mahler show up to take care of Edison's body. This is a little different from the Channel 4 movie in that they don't take Max with them away. Max is still in the Network 23 computers. He's hiding from Bryce, so Bryce can't find out what Edison knows. When Broidel and Mahler get Edison to their van, we see Gorister. Gorister's already dead. He's been killed to keep the story quiet, and Edison is going to be done the same. But Broidel and Mahler decide to turn in Edison as a live dead body because it makes more money for them. So in Channel 4's movie, Edison escapes from the body bank. In this version, Theora finds where he's at and goes to Nightingale's and buys his body. This turns out to be a relatively normal transaction, people buying and selling bodies via the body banks. Meanwhile, Max has started appearing in the Network 23 computer systems and also in their broadcasts. This is initially not taken well by the board. When he recovers, Edison sneaks back into Bryce's lab to try and get the copy of the exploding guy video again, where he meets not only Bryce, but Max, who has returned to Bryce's video screens. Just like in the Channel 4 movie, the memory of the Blitvert video is in Max's memory and is used to break the story of the Blitverts and the exploding people. Edison shows up at Grossberg's press conference to announce Edison's death and shows the Blitvert tape to the world. Up in the boardroom, Cheviot uses the scandal of the Blitverts to overthrow the old chairman Grossberg and take over as the chairman of Network 23. The only other change to the Channel 4 movie, since we're at the end, is Max's joke about their lips move. In the Channel 4 movie, it's politicians. In this episode, it's our network president.
How can you tell when our network president is lying? His lips move.
Now, this might have been a bad choice because the ABC executives might have thought that Max is talking about them. And the treatment of Max, especially in the second season, might have been triggered by this. So now we have most of the new cast. Pretty much everybody but Blank Reg and a new character named Rick. But everybody else has pretty much been introduced. Bryce's role will change from villain to good guy, starting with the second episode. The second episode is called Rakers. For the interesting things from this episode, we find that Max can talk to anybody on any television, which turns out to be handy in the long run. Max cannot distinguish between reality and television. So when it comes to a program called Missile Mike, which is apparently very violent but still targeted at children, he doesn't realize that Missile Mike is a show. And he tries to get Missile Mike stopped. The last thing is that money appears to be in terms of units and credits and paper money. So there's lots of ways to pay for stuff, and we will see them all done that way at some point. So Rakers posits a kind of underground game, a skateboarding game, which also turns out to be a blood sport as we learn more about it. Zigzag is looking to purchase raking and use it as a professional sport on Network 23. They hope that this will be better than the other big sport, Scumball. Both Zigzag and the Network 23 board, who also knows about raking, are looking for big profits from raking. Fiora has a connection to one of the players, her brother, which is our lead-in to get Edison involved, and that's good enough for the start. Fiora, hoping to help her brother, abandons her post at Network 23 and is fired. Edison insists that she shouldn't be fired and goes looking for her to find out why she left her post and what's going on. He finds Theora at a bar, and she tells him to buzz off. On his way out, he sees Simon Peller, a corrupt politician of which more will be heard later, talking to Zigzag people and mentioning Rakers and how great it is. Edison goes to see a guy he knows and that we are now introduced to called Rick, who is a source of information and occasional help to Edison in his adventures. Rick and Edison find the raking track and notice a Zigzag person watching the game. So now they put together that not only is raking real, that it's a blood sport, and that Zigzag and Network 23 are involved. Edison's link to Network 23 before he can report is broken, but Max seeks his way into a television at the raking track and breaks the story for Edison. Happy ending. In my opinion, this was a pretty weak episode. It's a pretty terrible choice for the second episode because it gives you bad expectations as to what stories are going to be like. The next episode is Body Banks, and it concerns body banks. Interesting things in this episode are that there appears to be a huge nuclear storage facility underneath the fringe and probably the city that nobody seems to know about except Edison. Getting the Metro cops to investigate a crime turns out to require payment in advance. This is called buying law. Body Banks, in addition to buying body parts, buys blood from donors, and this becomes a major source of income for people who live in the fringe. In this episode, the moral ambiguity of the body banks is revisited, but we also find out that a doctor is operating out of the body bank to conceal a program for getting transplant items for live people. Now, this might have been implied in the body banks, but here we see it being done from live donors and a specific patient. We start with Broydlin Mahler from episode 1, kidnapping a girl and testing her to see if she's suitable for an operation for some reason. We don't know what for exactly yet. This patient is part of the Plantagenet family, a mafia-like group that operates in the city, and they are doing all this to help someone called Mother. That's all. She's only referred to as Mother throughout the episode. They've also heard of the Max Headroom process and are looking to buy or steal or obtain somehow that process to imprint Mother's brain and get a Max-like person of her rather than having to replace bits and pieces of her over and over and over again. They're in to get a hold of the Max Headroom process is Ms. Formby, a member of the board who they have some unspecified blackmail on. To obtain the Max Headroom process, which is taken to be Max himself, Formby is pressuring Bryce to make Max available for an unspecified client, which is the Plantagenets. Meanwhile, Zigzag is demanding that Network 23 use Max in all of the Zigzag commercials. So here is our conflict. We've got Zigzag asking for Max, and we've got Formby and behind her the Plantagenets asking for Max. So there's the two events pulling at each other. Broyles and Mahler deliver the girl to the body banks, and a Professor Mason who has specifically asked for her or someone who has her pituitary gland. That's what they were looking for. Theora uses something called the Diogenes program, which allows her to magically reproduce the faces of the two guys who kidnapped the girl from her boyfriend's description, and sure enough, it's Broyles and Mahler. Rick from episode 2 shows up, and he and Edison investigate something for which Edison must leave behind his camera, which is promptly stolen. The camera is taken by the thief to Reg, who we recognize as Blank Reg, to be exchanged for some videos.
What's that?
It's a book.
Well, what's that?
It's a non-volatile storage medium. It's very rare. You should have one.
Back at the body bank, the girl is taken by ambulance to where the operation on Mother will be done, which will incidentally kill the girl. Meanwhile, there's a lot of meanwhiles in this episode. Max has started bad-mouthing Zigzag on the broadcast, and Zigzag's not too happy about it, and they demand that Max be tamed to do what Zigzag wants. Cheviot orders Bryce to stop Max from doing it. Bryce tells him that really only Edison can talk to Max and get him to play ball. But meanwhile, Bryce has cut off Max's access to the broadcasting software. As you can see, things are rapidly spinning out of control. We've got the girl in danger. We've got Reg involved somehow. We got Bryce being pressured to do this and that. It's just getting very complex. After Bryce cuts off Max's access to the broadcasting software, Formby asks specifically for a copy of Max's programming for safekeeping. And this is obviously trying to get the software to the Plantagenets so they can do the Mother thing. Meanwhile, Theora has tracked Edison's camera, which is at Blank Reg's, to Big Time. Edison goes there. Reg returns the camera for future consideration. Reg also sees the pictures that Theora made of Broyles and Mahler and identifies them as such. He then takes Edison to a bar where Broyles and Mahler are drinking. Instead of beating the two of them to death, Edison hires them, so Edison asks to be dead, sort of, to get into the body bank. Meanwhile, Formby has taken Bryce to the operating room where Mother is to try and force him to install the Max Headroom software. Bryce says he'll download it from Network 23. Bryce connects to Max back at Network 23 to tell him where he is, so he can tell Edison where he is and where he can find the girl and Mother. At the body bank, Edison and his group, which includes Broyles and Mahler now, are taken into the body bank and find Dr. Mason, who's still hanging around after sending the girl off to where Mother is. Edison tries to force Mason to tell him where the girl is, but Mason is murdered by his assistant, who is shouting about treachery. The assistant then kills himself with a poison capsule in his mouth. So it looks like a dead end, but Theora does some magic and finds out where the ambulance that took the girl went. And it's just, magic. Got to get from here to there. So Edison and his crew find the operating room, release Bryce, release the girl, blackmail Formby, and, oh, by the way, Mother dies. Max plays ball with Edison to be nice to Zigzag. Happy ending. I think this episode had one too many, or maybe two too many subplots. The body banks, the theft of Max from Mother, the intended use of Max by Zigzag, which really isn't a plot point, it's just there to have Max in danger of something. The traitor in Network 23, the missing Vidicam, Blank Reg, something. So what we wound up with was a breakneck race from clue to clue to clue to get where we needed to go, which is normal in a 1 hour action-adventure show, but was a little too heavy for me. But there was one thing that bothered me about this episode, which was the Max Headroom process is not the same as Max. So if Bryce had brought the Max Headroom process to Mother, it would not have actually threatened Max. Fourth episode is called Security System. The interesting things for me, Edison says that the walls to the city are made of stone, brick, wood, and ferrolingnut, whatever that is. Network 23 has a signal analysis system that does lie detecting that can tell you if someone on the TV screen is lying. And as it turns out, it is spoofable. Computer security systems are known as ICE for some reason, and breaking into a computer network or a computer system is called cracking ICE. There exist blank phones in addition to blank people. Blank phones cannot be traced, and Reg has one.
Oh, don't worry about that unit, son. It's a blank. Untraceable.
At one point, we see a Network 23 show called Lumpy's Proletariat, which is sort of an inside joke on the term lumpen proletariat, which was a description of Marxists of the lower and middle class who could not become to be made revolutionaries, so they were just lumps. Bryce has an extensive collection of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe memorabilia.
I'll never complete my collection of the original He-Man and the Masters of the Universe accessories.
So in this episode, we see something we see in our new modern era, which is giant repositories of personal information being kept without your knowledge, and maybe not as well as you would think, and maybe not for the purposes you think they are. Edison says this is Edison Carter Week 4 opening. It is the fourth episode. SSI is housed in the building that the corporation owns, and Edison is investigating rumors that SSI might be for sale, but not who to. So Edison is flying over the building that houses SSI, and suddenly his helicopter develops mechanical problems and makes an emergency landing on the roof of the SSI building. It turns out this problem is a ruse to gain access to the building, while Martinez, his pilot, loudly distracts the security people on the roof. Edison goes inside. From there, he bluffs his way into a meeting with Valerie Town, who's the CEO of SSI. In this interview, she tells him that the company is being sold, but not who to, and that she is shortly to be fired as CEO. Theora runs a scan of the truth-telling software, and it appears that she is telling the truth. But as we will discover, she's not, and SSI software is defeating Theora's lie detector software. Edison and the rest of Network 23 are worried about who's going to buy SSI. As they say,
Who's doing it? I mean, we all deal with SS every day. What if some really dangerous people got control of it?
Who do you think controls it now?
23.
rather suddenly, Edison discovers that his credit is 0 and that he is a wanted man. Miss Town turns out to have savaged Edison's credit and have him labeled as a committer of credit fraud, which turns out to be like murder. In fact, worse than murder.
My God, Edison, your file's been changed. You're poison everywhere.
So Edison is now on the run, and the Metro cops are looking for him. So where does he go? He goes to Blank Reg, of course. He uses Reg's blank phone to call Ms. Town and try and find out what's going on. She tells him that she's already been fired and has nothing to do with it. Edison decides that to clear his name, he's going to have to break into the SSI computers and find out who did what to him and how and why. And to do that, he needs someone who can crack the ice on SSI. He goes to Rick to find one, and it turns out that the best person to do it is Bryce. And as we will discover, the next best person is Theora. Damn handy, ain't it?
Check your own backyard, Edison.
So Bryce and Theora start trying to crack into SSI when they realize that security for Network 23 is actually handled by SSI. So SSI already knows that they're trying to break in, why, and who's with them, which turns out to be Murray, Theora, Bryce, and of course Edison. So everybody makes a break for it. Bryce, Edison, Theora, Murray, and Max in a mobile Max box. Very handy. They all head to Big Time Television, which is the only place they have to go again. They convince Reg to take the Big Time bus, park it right next to the SSI compound, plug into their network, which turns out to be via a street light, and use a low-powered signal to break in without being noticed. And I didn't understand that either, but just go with it, okay? In any case, it works. Max unexpectedly uses the network cable to actually cross into SSI. Out by the big time bus, though, SSI guards start appearing, and Reg panics and drives the bus away, losing the connection to SSI's network and incidentally leaving Max inside SSI. Max then connects with A7, SSI's central computer for watching over people and doing whatever it is they do. And Blank Reg and the bus stop. Bryce, suddenly announced, has hacked some credentials for he and Edison so that they can just walk into the building. This seems to have overridden Edison's red flags, which are everywhere, but okay. They also take Max's now empty Max Transit box in hopes of getting Max back out of the SSI computer network. So they walk up to SSI, and they just walk in because they have the appropriate clearances. Somehow Theora and Reg and Murray and Dominique have reconnected to the Network 23 computer. How this happens is not exactly clear. Reg just walks in with a cable and says, here you are, connect to it. And they do. This will allow them to interface with Edison, who has conveniently brought his camera into SSI. With their fancy credentials, Edison and Bryce just walk right into A7's computer room. A7, by the way, has a female personality, and we discover that Max has already seduced A7, and she just gives up the whole story as to who ordered Edison's credit savaged and what they're doing, and that SSI is not actually for sale. This is interrupted by Miss Town suddenly appearing with some security guards, grabbing Edison and Bryce and taking them to a freezer unit to have them killed by freezing them to death. Town returns to the A7 computer room and discovers Max and A7 talking to each other, and she orders Max eradicated from the computer memory. And she uses words that, unfortunately for her, are taken by A7 to include a threat to A7. A7 then rebels, restores Edison's credit, savages Town's credit, has her declared a criminal, frees Edison and Bryce, and hurrah. Metro cops show up and take Mrs. Town away. Bryce puts Max in the Max Transit box, and they all run away. Happy ending. But at the very end, there's another inside joke, where Red sees Max on the television and wonders what big-time television could have been with Max on their broadcast, which of course is in the movie exactly what happened.
With one of him.
Mother technology, and it rebels.
Is actually an inside joke about what the fifth episode is called Blanks. The interesting things in this episode, televisions have no off switch. It is literally illegal to turn your television off, and the sentence for doing so is years long. It's also shown that regular citizens are so addicted to television that if they lose access to television, the society begins to break down. That's addictive. The definition of blanks is solidified. Blanks are people who have no records in the city's databases. As far as the government is concerned, they don't exist. Simon Peller, from earlier episodes, has invented a crime where you can be incarcerated if you're actually a blank. So the crime is just being a blank. Horoscopes are now based on the position of satellites, not stars. This Shash graphic, what Shash is, it was a slang term for the video snow that we've seen in other episodes. You might notice in this episode that the division between the intro and the episode did not have any video snow. And so instead they just had a graphic that said Shash should go here. We discover the government of the city is made up of television networks who have representatives, and the people vote, as we'll see, they don't really vote, on who runs the city. This is called instant democracy, which it decidedly is not. Bryce builds a flying insect-looking thing that has a camera, a microphone, and a transmission device so that you can fly into a room, be a literal fly on the wall, and hear what's going on. This bug appeared in other venues, for example, in The Fifth Element, where it was a cockroach that had the camera and the microphone. Network connections can be graphically described, and firewalls on the screen can appear as balls of shash. Episode begins with Metro cops appearing at a building to arrest a girl. Now, she turns out to be a blank, As she's being hauled away, she shouts that she's done nothing wrong and that blank is beautiful. She's taken to an otherwise empty courtroom for trial. The trial is by a computer, and the prosecution and defense are via floppy disk. When dinosaurs ruled the earth, the things he's holding were called 3.5-inch floppy disks, which were not actually floppy. And what they were and why they were called floppy is a long story, and it's a long story. Meanwhile, in the city, services like water and television and power have started intermittently failing. These interruptions are being caused by a group of computer-savvy blanks. They are blackmailing the city in general to release all the blanks that Peller has had arrested, or they'll shut down the services for the entire city. Unaware that all this is going on, Bryce is showing off to Edison, and this will become important later on, which is the only reason we're shown it. But there is one station still on the air. Big time television from Blank Reg's bus. In their investigations of where these break-ins are occurring, Theora and Bryce discover that there is an unexpected firewall in the central computers of the city. This is known as the shash on the graphic display. They decide to send Max to the firewall, believing that the people on the other side will be enticed by the appearance of Max at all, and Max can get inside, find out what's going on, and they can pull him back out from wherever it is the firewall is guarding. Max is allowed through the firewall, has a conversation with the blanks, who decide that rather than just erase him, they'll just let him go. But when Max returns, he tells Bryce and Theora who the blanks are, what they're up to, and why they're doing it. Knowing that Big Time is the only station on the air, Edison goes to find Blank Reg to find out what's going on. We discover that Reg is not just a blank, but he's also helping the blackmailing blanks to get what they want. To do this, he is to set up what's called the sunset trigger, which will act as the ticking time bomb for the rest of the episode. We must solve this before the ticking time bomb goes off. That is, before we see the sun set. Got that? Okay. Theora goes to Peller with a camera and uses her feminine wiles, which mostly involve just walking in the door, to try and get him to free the blanks. He refuses, but Theora has video of him refusing, which will turn out to be important when we get back to the Trojan horse thing. Meanwhile, Edison convinces Reg to get him in contact with the blanks. Edison gets the blanks to promise that if the blanks are released from jail, they will not destroy the city's infrastructure. With the video that Theora has of Peller refusing to release the blanks, Bryce has made a video of Peller appearing to agree to release the blanks. So that's shown on Network 23. Edison shows the interview with the blanks, so they appear to be agreeing. Peller is backed into a corner where, having been seen allowing the blanks to be released, he can't go back on that and order them to be not released. Still with me? Okay. So we have a happy ending, and Reg gets to dance a little jig on top of the Big Time bus. The last episode of the first season is called The War. The interesting things for that is that there's an ad market, a Wall Street-like place where advertising time on the various networks is bought and sold. Edison discovers that news is part of entertainment. At this point in the history of U.S. television networks, all the news departments have been placed underneath the entertainment divisions.
Since when has news been entertainment? Since it was invented?
We start with a girl on the fringes carrying what looks like a gun. She's Janie Crane, who we've seen before as a Network 23 reporter. She loads the gun-looking thing with a clip that has a Network 23 logo on it. Turns out the gun is a long-lens television camera, and she's been watching over a mysterious bus, which is not the Big Time bus, just another bus doing something. Then the Network 23 board being pitched access to the Red Brigade's video by a guy named Braddock, who is acting, he says, as a go-between. So rather than do business with the White Brigade, Cheviot turns him down. Braddock then sells the story of the next White Brigade explosion to a place called Breakthrough TV, who uses it in their network news. Turns out Braddock is actually not just a go-between, but he's actually picking the targets that the White Brigades blow up for maximum video effect. Back on the fringe, the White Brigade is ready for their next explosion attack. That's why the bus is there that Janie has been looking at. There is a massive explosion. Turns out the video that we've seen of the explosions is being taken by people in the bus. The explosion happens and Janie is wounded but not killed. Janie is then captured by the White Brigade guys who don't quite know what to do with her. I mean, they're not murderers, not yet anyway, but they're not entirely sure what they should do. To cover the story, Carter then flies by helicopter to where the explosion is, but once he gets there, he's refused access to the scene by Metro cops because the entire story has been sold to Breakthrough TV. While nosing around outside the area where Breakthrough TV has control, Edison discovers the gun clip that Janie was putting into her camera gun at the beginning of the show. When they take it back to Network 23, they discover that the clip, which if you look closely has videotape in it, shows the bus that we know is tied up with the White Brigade. Edison decides to try and find the White Brigade. He does, and their headquarters turns out to be just a TV studio. They tell him that the whole thing is a sham just to sell fake news to television stations and get a cut of the ad revenue. But in reality, the White Brigade has decided to up their game, and they planted a bomb in the ad market that we saw at the beginning of the show and detonate it and kill or wound many people. Back up in the boardroom, after the ad market attack, Cheviot decides that Network 23 wants to buy access to the White Brigade attacks after all. Edison flies back to find the White Brigade bus, which he does, and discovers that there's another bomb about to be set off. And they intend to have a casualty of this bomb, Janie. They are going to explicitly kill Janie to get rid of her. Edison saves the girl. The bomb goes off. The entire White Brigade who are in the bus are killed. Happy ending. Next time, a shortened version of Season 2, the last of the interview shows, the great Max hack, and Max rides off into the digital sunset. Sort of. Bye-bye.
And now we come to a special moment on Network 23. That is the most pointless and extravagant television award. This, of course, is the award for the piece of television which, in the opinion of the judges, is the most expensive and wasteful use of television time this year. So, let's see the nominations, shall we? I'll be right back.